Boom to the hey, all you sports fans out there in the two-bowl-sphere, to you, the individual, as part of the collective. Welcome to another edition of Fast Track Sports Rack highlights here on Talk Radio version of the OMSR. I am, as always, your brief but very concise host, Will, the alternative ESPN Sports Throw. Always do a little voiceover intro like this, in this format. Let you know the clipboard are coming up, and the last two wherefores. Therefore, briefly and concisely talking about final SEC days, talking points, focus on Georgia and Ole Miss, and a lot of names you'll be hearing thrown at you. Pay attention to the all SEC teams, 3 deep. And agree with or not agree with, this sort of took a backseat to everything else that was popping in the world on Thursday, this being Saturday, as the date of this show. Quite understandable, as you can imagine, especially for my part, yours truly here at the OMSR, who can trace family lineage back to the founding of The Hague in the Netherlands. Only instance I know of in the world, or major world capital, the family surname begat that. Not the other way around. I even looked it up in the greater LA area, in the white pages. There's one Hague. One. Not too many of us. You can imagine, Holland's not a big country. So I wasn't too thrilled about, you can imagine, all that. Being able to trace 2/3 of the family lineage back to Hague and Copenhagen, so therefore, Danish-Dutch, Dutch-Danish, however you want to look at it. Kind of had to focus on, that's a question of priorities, as I always say. You know, the OMSR is a Renaissance man kind of place where sports and politics collide with MacGyver. Anyway, that's coming up. Quickie Sport Round's going to be about how the beast is going to be in the East and not the best in the West. The SEC is going through a whole new cycle we have not seen in a decade. Roll clips.
SEC Media Days here. Georgia's Todd Gurley, maybe the best running back in all of college football. Missed a few games last year, back healthy now. Heisman candidate, depending on how things break for the Georgia Bulldogs. Health, of course, was such a big part of what went wrong last year when they were 8-5 overall, 5-3 in the SEC. Here's what Mark Richt told the print media today.
I think we have a tremendous culture right now for work ethic. I think we have a tremendous culture of guys wanting to lead in the right way. Makes Georgia a great place to be.
Obviously, what's important is what happens at the end of the year. I'm not happy to be named number 2. I'm not going to start cheering, we're number 2. No, I think that, I think that in the end it's going to be Georgia.
Of course he does, and here's what the SEC media had to say. The projections for the SEC East, they like South Carolina just a little better than Georgia. It was a matter of 100 and change votes here among the SEC media. And maybe the lean there is simply the fact that on September 13th, the game between the two schools is at South Carolina. Where do you have Georgia in the SEC East?
Well, I have them second, and for that reason that you just alluded to. Going to Williams-Brice Stadium, they will have a tough game early against Clemson. They will be battle-tested, and they'll have a week off, but so will South Carolina. And I really think for that reason that they're just not going to have enough to be able to overcome a difficult South Carolina team at home. But I do love their quarterback, Hudson Mason. So much moxie, so much confidence. Really took that team and put it on his back last year after a difficult injury to Aaron Murray. I think the world of this guy, and I think he's going to have an outstanding season.
I think Georgia's going to win the SEC East. I really like Hudson Mason. I think it's huge that he was able to play in 2.5 games at the end of last year to build confidence. I love the weapons around him. The biggest question for Georgia is the defense. They were young last year. It showed. They gave up 30 or more points in 6 of 8 conference games last season. 8 starters come back. In comes Jeremy Pruitt from Florida. Amplify the hand signals, help these young players stop thinking so much and just play fast. They're young, they're talented. Maybe the best linebacking core led by Ramik Wilson in the entire country, and Leonard Floyd coming off the edge. Major question marks in the secondary. They dismissed both safeties. They're starting corner transfers. But the schedule, the first 2 games define everything for Georgia, in my opinion. Clemson at home, you get a bye. Then you go at South Carolina, as you guys were talking to. If they play well, the quarterback plays well. Hudson Mason develops confidence. The defense plays well and develops confidence. You go on the road to a place like Williams-Brice Stadium where South Carolina's won more consecutive home games than anybody else in the country, then watch out for Mark Richt and this very young but very talented Georgia Bulldog football team.
See what happens with the defensive backfield there in Athens. Ole Miss also front and center here today in Hoover, Alabama. Of course, they had the fabulous freshmen last year. Now the experience as sophomores. Media voted on the SEC West as well. Alabama and Auburn on top there. Ole Miss getting some love. They're grouped in with LSU and Mississippi State. This is a very interesting team in Ole Miss because Bo Wallace finally goes into a season, the quarterback, with good health, and then the emergence of all the young players from wide receiver to tight end to left tackle. And the defense, when you really dig into it, is pretty decent.
Well, I mean, I will say this. I love this team. I mean, I am buying. I've been saying it all week. I think the world of what Hugh Freeze has done, and I look at his recruiting class, what they did in 2013. Those guys are all entering their sophomore year. I expect a huge bump in productivity for all those guys on defense. A guy that I really love, Cedarius Bryant, my favorite player in the SEC, 5'9", 218 pounds. He is the emotional leader. He's in everyone's face after every snap. You can see it. Every time you watch this guy, he's in someone's face on every snap. And I love him. He flies around, and I think he's a difference maker. And I think they finished third in the West for that.
I'm going to say they finished fourth. I'm going to give them 8 wins in the regular season, maybe a 9th win in the bowl game, and then they're building. Hugh Freeze won 7 games his first year, 8 his second. It could be 9 this season. Bo Wallace at quarterback. He's got to stay healthy, something he hasn't been able to do throughout his career. He's got to be able to stay consistent. Those young, true sophomore, second-year players have to become leaders as true sophomores, and that's rare. But defensively, guys, they need a better pass rush. 2 key elements. Robert Kimdiche, last year's #1 high school recruit, has to stay at the defensive tackle 3 technique position. Last year, they were flipping him end to tackle. But 2, C.J. Johnson comes back at defensive end. An outstanding pass rusher off the edge. They lost him last year to a leg injury. Isaac Gross is an undersized defensive tackle at 250 pounds, also very good at rushing the passer. They can be so much more dominant on that side of the ball this year with a more consistent pass rush. I think they'll have it. I'm putting them at 4th, 9 wins with the bowl game.
I'm glad you mentioned Kimdiche because he was getting love today. First team All-SEC will have the call of that game as we are here on the final day of SEC Media Days 2014. You saw all the Tide fans, and they would like the look of the first team All-SEC preseason offense. It includes T.J. Yeldon and Amari Cooper and tight end O.J. Howard and guard Ari Kwanjo, as the first team quarterback listed was Nick Marshall. First team defense has the sophomore Robert Kimdiche making first team SEC as a sophomore preseason. Alabama's a Sean Robinson, a good group with A.J. Johnson, Ramik Wilson, and Cody Pruitt from Ole Miss, the safety who's gotten a lot of national attention going into this year. But we want to give attention to folks that didn't show up on the first team. Just names that need to be there that weren't there first team All-SEC.
Well, let me first say, when you go down this 3 deep, it's pretty ridiculous.
Oh,
this is the ultimate all-star team.
Yes.
Firstly. But as I look at this, if I had some quantities, and I'll start on offense with you guys, I'm looking at Sammy Coates at wide receiver starting on the first team. I don't deny Sammy Coates' physical abilities at all. He's a big target. He can fly, straight out speed. But in an offense that we probably anticipate Auburn throwing between 35% of the time,
yeah, absolutely.
I just don't know if he's going to have the same numbers as some other guys on this list that were on second and third team. What if I were to substitute for Sammy Coates a Laquan Treadwell at Ole Miss?
Far more impactful.
As a true freshman was second in the SEC in catches. Or what about Malcolm Mitchell at Georgia? Lost last year in the first game because of an ACL. He's one of the most explosive offensive playmakers in the SEC. Can take a hitch, turn it into a touchdown. That's the Florida Gators 2 years ago.
Well, and my problems on offense is T.J. Yeldon. And it's not a knock on T.J. Yeldon. It's about the fact that he'll be splitting carries with Kenyon Drake if he ever does get out of his suspension. And, of course, Derrick Henry, who had a breakout year. So I want to replace him with Mike Davis. I think he's got the best offensive line in the SEC.
Gain weight. Davis could be the 2 best runners in the SEC.
I think so, without question. He had 7 of the first 9 games last year. He had 100 yards. He gained weight so he can add some yards and some carries late in the year. And I also, on the defensive side, I take Gabe Wright out and I put in Trey Flowers. He did lose Chris Smith on one side, but Deatrick Wise on the other side. He's a really unproven guy, but a really talented
Baller,
guy.
Arkansas.
Absolutely.
What do you think?
That's a good example, though, of the Auburn bump. When you win the SEC, the next year, your guys get that little bump. I think Bernardrick McKinney, the linebacker from Mississippi State, should not be second team. And I completely agree. Trey Flowers at Arkansas has to be preseason first team. Also, Chris Jones at Mississippi State. I think by the end of the season, we're going to be talking about Chris Jones as one of the better defensive linemen in the country.
I think he had a better year than Robert Kimdiche at Ole Miss, and Chris Jones didn't start at Mississippi State. That's how good he could be. Also, guys, you look at this list, there's 3 starting safeties on the first-team defense. DeShazer Everett from Texas A&M has switched from cornerback to safety, so why not a Tre'Davious White at LSU, cornerback, and bumping him up to play alongside Vernon Hargrave?
I'll also say this, quarterbacks Nick Marshall, Dak Prescott, Bo Wallace, 1, 2, and 3 in first, second, third team. There's a very good chance that the final one could be quarterbacks who haven't yet played.
Like a Hudson Mason?
Absolutely.
Very real possibility.
We'll see how it plays out and who will be crowned.
Some good stuff going on there. Call me crazy, but I think whoever wins the East this time around is your SEC winner. Now, with the caveat of the OMSR is a Bama booster. I've said this many times on many shows. And you look at the national championships they broke down for the SEC, those 7 years. Okay, Florida had 2. And you got to split the rest up between LSU, Auburn, and Bama. So clearly, it's been the SEC West has been the best. This year, you know, they're talking about Ole Miss, Mississippi State. I think back to Johnny Manziel's first game. It was on CBS. Vern and Gary were calling it. Tamu in Florida talked about, well, we just don't know how Texas A&M is going to fare in this new conference they're in, being used to the ways of the Big 12. I see them lucky to win more than 4 games. We have this unproven freshman we never seen. And Johnny Manziel, that was his coming out party. So this could very easily happen with some quarterbacks. You've heard their names, but they have a better supporting cast this year. I'm telling you, it's not going to be your typical LSU, Bama, Auburn. I could be totally wrong about that because the quarterbacks will come on board due to the system. They got good supporting cast around them, but I just think it's either it's Georgia or South Carolina's to lose. All the video highlights courtesy 2 SEC Media Days and ESPN vis-a-vis CFB live. Everything else to the OMSR. Okay, thanks for watching. That's the last SEC Media Days. No silly DUIs while you're out there celebrating what's left of sports for the summer, like baseball, arena football, and WNBA. We're later out here.